If you're going to make the argument that a fetus is a whole child, then what you're talking about is a child giving birth to another child. So you're requiring harm of a child in the case of these like 10 or 12-year-old kids who get like assaulted by their uncles and stuff. Like you just can't do the blanket ban. As I understand it, in this midterm election that we just had, Republicans really did not do so well. And it's not just that Republicans didn't do so well, but that conservative ideas did not win out, because repeatedly we've had these instances where states are trying to pass some kind of like constitutional amendment or something along those lines to try to restrict access to abortion. I live in Kansas. Kansas tried to do that, and the voters came out and said, hell no, we're protecting abortion rights. Similar thing happened in Ohio. And they keep doing this thing where they have these abortion referendums on off years in the August voting time instead of the November voting time, which is a bunch of BS. And then people just come out in droves. So one of the things to look at when we're looking at these, how did the Republicans versus Democrats do during the midterm elections, and when we're looking at the presidential debate, like the Republican primary debates, is trying to see like, okay, what are the issues that voters actually care about right now? It seems pretty clear that the voters, even Republican women, are in favor of abortion rights. The voters want people to have access to that choice. You know, it doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out that the kind of people who are going to be the most devastated and the most hurt by abortion restrictions, especially all-out abortion restrictions, is going to be like little girls. Frankly, they're going to suffer the most in these situations where they don't have access to abortion. Even Republican grandmas are out here saying, I voted to protect abortion rights in Ohio in order to make sure that, you know, these grandbabies are not going to have to go through anything horrible. So before we go too much further, I just want to say, hit the like button if you're enjoying the content. Consider subscribing and hitting the bell and maybe clicking all notifications to get notifications for the channel. Also consider checking out my brand new merch store, which just launched. There's going to be a link down in the description. And you can also check out my Patreon, where there are some promo deals for patrons if you want to maybe get a deal on some of your merchandise. So thank you very much for watching the content. Hope you continue to enjoy. So yeah, on the same week that we had all these midterms going not really in favor of Republicans, we also had this presidential debate, Republican primary debate, really. And I was interested in finding out, like, what did they talk about? And I was thinking, oh, we'll do a whole reaction to the whole thing. But for the most part, they talked about foreign policy, looking at some of the highlights that people have posted, some of the articles people have posted, talking about, like, breaking down what was discussed during this. They covered a lot of foreign policy stuff, interestingly, and not as much the kind of issues that voters actually care about when it comes to who is going to be in the presidential office. You know, like, people do care a lot about abortion and protecting it. It's like we've repeatedly demonstrated, even in purple states, even in Republican states, again, that we want to protect abortion rights, you know? So it's interesting that abortion and, like, you know, gay rights and trans kids and stuff, like these things that do seem to be making a big impact on whether these Republicans are winning or not, they did not spend the almost 2 hours that they had of this debate talking about those issues. So instead of responding to the entire debate, because I don't want to do an entire foreign policy 3-hour-long response video, we're just going to respond to the last roughly 20 minutes of the debate. Anyhow, so let's strap in for this, specifically the abortion part of the video. Let's go.
Let's talk now about last night's election results. Abortion rights supporters saw victories in Ohio and Virginia following earlier wins in states like Kansas and Kentucky. Governor DeSantis, first to you, how do you see the path forward for Republicans on this issue?
Well, I stand for a culture of life, and I understand that it's important that everyone gets a shot. I'm reminded of a story about a young mother who was struggling.
It's like, he's like, I'm going to say I am 100% pro-life in every situation, and like, but I'm going to avoid directly saying that by veering off into a story about a person I made up.
In Jamaica about 45 years ago. She was counseled to not have a baby because she was poor, baby wouldn't have opportunity, and she came close to have an abortion, but she decided to have the baby born poor in Jamaica. And the reason I know that story is because that baby girl ended up emigrating to the state of Florida, becoming a lawyer and a judge, and I appointed her to the Florida Supreme Court in August of 2022.
Okay, so referring to some lady that he put on the Supreme Court. Okay, he didn't invent her, although I wouldn't put it past him.
We're better off when everybody counts. We're better off when we can promote a culture of life. At the same time, I understand that some of these states are doing it a little bit different. Texas is not going to do it the same as New Hampshire. Iowa's not necessarily going to do it the same as Virginia. So you got to work from the bottom up. You got to do a better job on these referenda. I think of all the stuff that's happened to the pro-life cause, they have been caught flat-footed on these referenda, and they have been losing the referenda. A lot of the people who are voting for the referenda are Republicans who would vote for a Republican candidate. So you got to understand how to do that. But let's just be clear. The Democrats...
Did he just come out against democracy? I'm sorry, I made him
taken a position.
I made him talk faster, and that was maybe a mistake. Because he's just like talking he said referenda, which is the plural of referendum, and by that means when we vote on these things. He's like, yeah, we're losing on these referenda. Even Republicans, like, are you saying that we should make the process less democratic, sir?
To do it the same as Virginia. So you got to work from the bottom up. You got to do a better job on these referenda. I think of all the...
Oh, yeah. Oh, you got to do a better job on these. Maybe he's just saying you need to do better grassroots organizing. You got to reach out better. Or does he mean you need to limit people's right to vote? Or like you need to have it be in an even more secret time of the year than the August one? I actually think I was reading something earlier, and I don't know if this is... I didn't really dig further into it. But I was watching some reporting that was saying that in Ohio, they had actually previously made August elections like against the rules, basically, because of like their reasoning was that there's always low turnout and that cost a lot of money to hold the elections in August. And then they went on to hold an election in August specifically to try to catch out people and pass this constitutional amendment to like limit abortion rights or yeah, something along those lines. I don't know the exact wording and details of what they were trying to do in Ohio this time, but I do know that the voters won.
Stuff that's happened to the pro-life cause. They have been caught flat-footed on these referenda, and they have been losing the referenda. A lot of the people who are voting for the referenda are Republicans who would vote for a Republican candidate. So you got to understand how to do that. But let's just be clear. The Democrats have taken a position. They will not identify the point at which there should be any protection all the way up until birth. That is wrong, and we cannot stand for that.
All right, Governor DeSantis, thank you. Ambassador
Okay, I guess he's just saying that there needs to be protection up till birth. Which, like, again, a lot of Republicans don't agree with in, like, a blanket statement. Like, people will say, I'm pro-life for religious reasons, and I think that generally abortion should be avoided, and, like, it should be the last thing that happens, right? But, again, like, if you're going to make the argument that a fetus is a whole child, then what you're talking about is a child giving birth to another child. So you're requiring harm of a child in the case of these, like, 10 or 12-year-old kids who get like assaulted by their uncles and stuff. Like you just can't do the blanket ban. I wonder if they're going to talk about any exceptions if like while we're on the topic.
Have you weigh in. Former President Trump has consistently blamed the abortion issue and how Republican candidates have talked about it for their electoral losses. How do you see the path forward?
He's right.
I've said it before.
Worst person you know is correct. This is that Onion article. The worst person you know has made a good point.
You have to be honest with the American people. This is a personal issue for every woman and every man. I am unapologetically pro-life, not because the Republican Party tells me to be, but because my husband Michael was adopted and I had trouble having both of my children. So I'm surrounded by blessings. Having said that, when you look post-Roe, a wrong was made right. They took it out of the hands of unelected justices and they put it in the hands of the people. And now we're seeing states vote. And what I'll tell you is, as much as I'm pro-life, I don't judge anyone for being pro-choice, and I don't want them to judge me for being pro-life. So when we're looking at this, there are some states that are going more on the pro-life.
She has the most libertarian kind of thing on this. I guess that's like sort of where Biden ended up coming around to. He's like, I'm a Catholic, I don't believe in it, but I believe that this is a decision between you and your doctor. It's like, I guess that is the sort of libertarian position on this. Abortion happens more under pro-life policy anyways. I mean, that's true, right? Like, because abortion is not the only effect of pro-life policy. Pro-life policy also tends to be anti-birth control, which means that you have more unexpected pregnancies, and it's at least like relatively the same rate. Like, people will be seeking abortion at least at the same rate, if not more, under these policies. Yeah, loving that it's dark when I get home now. Welcome to hell.
life side. I welcome that. There's some states that are going more on the pro-choice side. I wish that wasn't the case, but the people decided. But when it comes to the federal law, which is what's being debated here, be honest, it's going to take 60 Senate votes, a majority of the House, and a president to sign it. So no, we haven't had 60 Senate votes in over 100 years. We might have 45 pro-life senators. So no Republican president can ban abortions any more than a Democrat president can ban these state laws. So let's find consensus. Let's agree on how we can ban late-term abortion.
She's like one of the more reasonable people, except that I know she's got some weird beliefs, but every time I see her on here, there are things where I'm like, I don't hate her, you know? Yeah, and they also attack the infrastructure of women's healthcare and women's ability to make informed choices. Exactly, yeah. They limit abortion and they limit sex education, and yeah, we ended up with more unwanted pregnancies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Let's make sure we encourage adoptions and good quality adoptions. Let's make sure we make contraception.
Good quality adoptions kind of made my ears tingle a little bit, because I don't think that I would be a good quality adoption as a trans communist. You know what I mean?
Accessible. Let's make sure that none of these state laws put a woman in jail or give her the death penalty for getting an abortion. Let's focus on how to save as many babies as we can and support as many moms as we can, and stop the judgment.
Ambassador.
We don't need to divide America over this issue anymore.
Thank you, Ambassador. Senator Scott.
She made a sensible point.
Senator Scott,
Yeah, exactly. Making sure more babies are adopted by white cishet Christian couples. Yeah, let's keep over monitoring Native American women and taking their children away.
You to weigh in. How do you see the path forward, and what do you make of what Ambassador Haley?
Okay, wait. So weren't there like 9 people before? I love the process of watching it slim down. There were like 9 people, or 8 maybe, and now we're down to 5. So it's Chris Christie, the lady who I don't entirely hate, Ron DeSantis, Rami is his name. I don't remember that dude's name. Does he work in the House right now? Adoptions can and do go terribly, but probably none of the reasons she thinks. I hate her. She's a terrible person. Oh, no. Like I'm saying, I think she's a terrible person, but she does tend to be like one of the more sensible Republican people on this stage, just with these people.
Said, do you see this as a consensus issue?
Well, I'm 100% pro-life.
Oh, yeah, I hate this guy. I'm pretty sure that this guy is the one who was in the Senate Judiciary Committee who was saying, like, oh, letting trans kids transition is like letting a kid eat ice cream for every meal.
I have a 100% pro-life voting record. I would certainly, as President of the United States, have a 15-week national limit. I would not allow states like California, Illinois, or New York to have abortion up until the day of birth. I certainly wouldn't not allow for governors, former governor, Democratic governor of Virginia, who talked about infanticide. We need a 15-week federal limit. 3 out of 4 Americans agree with a 15-week limit. 47 out of 50 countries in Europe agree with a 15-week limit. I would challenge both Nikki and Ron to join me at a 15-week limit. It is in our nation's best interest. And frankly, I think it's unethical and immoral to allow for abortions up until the day of birth. We haven't.
As always, it bears repeating that you don't get elective abortions in the 3rd trimester. You get like a baby who doesn't have a brain scooped out of you. You know what I mean? Like you get like a baby whose brain formed outside of its skull removed. Like this is people who've set up, nurseries. They're ready for their baby. If you say there should never be abortion past that point, what you're saying is that those people should be like required to give birth to dead babies, or required to be septic before you will treat them, or you turn their miscarriage into a criminal investigation. Like so many things that are wrong with that. Yeah, this Republican lady is the garbage you huddle with because it doesn't have quite as many flies. True.
Opportunity in this nation to stop that reckless behavior from states like California, New York, and Illinois. I'd go a step further. In my parents' plan, we start by talking about funding, block granting resources to crisis pregnancy centers. We should support adoption. There are a number of ways that we can say to the expected
crisis pregnancy centers present themselves like they might be a place where you could get an abortion, and they string you along until past the point at which you can't get a legal abortion anymore. Right, yeah, Texas currently has a law that puts a bounty on you for having a miscarriage. Like, they will investigate you. Yeah, really, what you should give those people who get third trimester abortions need counseling, because it must be awful to lose a wanted baby at that stage in the pregnancy.
That we stand with you. We should not only be pro-life before the child is born, we should be pro-life after the child is born just as much.
Senator Scott, thank you. Ambassador Haley.
Is that a call for more welfare? Is that a call for more funding for school lunches? Like, what do you mean? There are already tons of kids in the system who need to be adopted. None of these people talking this crap seem to be stepping up. They never do. They never do. Every time you're like, oh, you know, we should do adoption more than we do abortion. Like, those people are never willing to step up and offer those resources. And often those are people that don't even have their own kids anyway. So it's like, okay, well, you're clearly like avoiding having a kid for financial reasons or something else like that.
Your name was invoked. Would you support a 15-week federal limit?
I would support anything that would pass, because that's what would save more babies and support more moms. But you have to be honest with the American people, and I appreciate that Tim keeps calling me out for this. But Tim, there was a bill last year. Lindsey Graham sponsored it. You didn't even co-sponsor the bill. And then when you first were interviewed on this, when you ran, you wouldn't even say you were for 15 weeks. What I'm saying to the American people is, let's see what we can agree on. Let's bring people together and decide what we can.
That was either a major call out from her or a huge lie from her, and he may have lied in response. Like, that's just not true. Like, she's calling him out for changing his position on this, I guess, for the sake of convenience. Obviously, it's not a bad thing to change your mind and update your opinion. It is a bad thing to do so for political convenience.
Agree on. I will sign anything where we can get 60 Senate votes, but don't make the American people think that you're going to push something on them when we don't even have the votes in the Senate. It's important that we're honest about that.
Let me go to Mr. Ramaswamy. Would you support a 15-week federal ban, and what is the path forward on this issue?
I just wanted to say, I think Nikki Haley did invoke being honest, and I just want to give credit to Tim Scott. He's honest about where he stood, and I think you should be honest, not making a political calculus, but to say, if a bill is served up, would you sign it? Here's my view on this. Speaking as a man, they say men have trouble speaking on this issue. I don't think we need to be that way. It was my home state of Ohio.
He's like, I, a man, I'm ready to tell you what you need to know about abortion. Oh, no.
I'm upset about this yesterday, that passed a constitutional amendment that now effectively codifies a right to abortion all the way up to the time of birth without parental consent. Why? It's back to that Republican culture of losing. The Republicans did not have an alternative amendment or vision on the table. I know Ohio. I was born, raised, and I live there. It's representative of the country. If in the state of Ohio, we talked about access to contraception, adoption, and also here's the missing ingredient in this movement, sexual responsibility for men. We live in an era of reliable genetic paternity tests that are 100% reliable. So we can say men deserve more responsibility. So we can tell women we're all in this together. It's not men's rights versus women's rights. It's about human rights. And I come back to that case.
This is really interesting. So Rami is in support of like keeping dads on the hook for their, irresponsible ejaculation. Cue the diverse panel of men in bow ties. That's a really interesting position. We need to hold men responsible. Like in the conversation around reducing abortions and having access to contraception, we also need to tell men to watch where they nut. That's what this guy's official position is.
That Clarence Thomas spoke of. A pregnant woman walking down the street. She's assaulted. The unborn child dies in that assault. You find me one person in this country who says that criminal does not deserve liability for that death. You won't find one. That says we share the same instincts on this issue, but we require, I believe, a different generation of leadership to actually lead us forward and unite the country on this with honesty.
Thank you, Mr. Ramaswamy.
Walk back in and hear ejaculation. You're welcome.
Governor Christie, as you know, federal limits are important to a lot of Republicans. Where do you stand on this issue, and what is the path forward for Republicans?
For 50 years, conservative lawyers have been arguing that the federal government should have absolutely nothing to do with this issue constitutionally because it's nowhere in the Constitution. And then Dobbs comes and we finally gain that victory, which was the creation of a constitutional right out of thin air that didn't exist. And now we have people running to say, let's short circuit the states from doing what they need to do, and let's go right to some type of federal ban at a certain number of weeks. And people on the stage have been all over the place, 20 weeks, 15 weeks, 12, 6. Look, the Frowners were really smart. And this is an issue that should be decided in each state. And I trust the people of this country, state by state, to make the call for themselves. Now, it's going to lead to a lot of divergence. In Oklahoma, you can't get an abortion unless the life of the mother is at risk. In my home state of New Jersey, it goes up to 9 months that you get an abortion. I find that morally reprehensible, but that is what the people of our state have voted for. And we should not short circuit that process until every state's people have the right to weigh in on it. But here's the bigger issue, Kirsten. The bigger issue is, and Tim began to touch on this, we're not pro-life for the whole life. To be pro-life for the whole life means that the life of a 16-year-old drug addict on the floor of the county lockup is precious, and we should get treatment for her to restore her life. The 52-year-old who's drug addicted.
Like, yeah, okay, so you brought up a 16-year-old drug addict, but you didn't bring up the 16-year-old who falls pregnant. And like, are you against the 16-year-old having an opportunity to go to college because she's too busy being a mom? Like, I don't know, dude. They're so gung-ho on adoption, yet states regularly lose track of kids in their custody. We can't trust them with the kids already in their care. I don't trust them to set up good adoptions. Yeah, that was something I didn't bring up earlier, Eric, but I did think of it, that you have this problem where these kids are not like in orphanages. Overwhelmingly, kids who are in the system who don't have parents or whatever, like adoptive children, they're not like in a group home for children. They're in foster families. They're in foster care. And so many foster families are primarily in it for the money. They don't spend very much money on the kids, or they're sexually abusing them, or they're religiously indoctrinating them, or whatever. Like, foster care is not a system that is very well maintained, let's say. Let's be nice and say that it's not very well maintained. So you can't even say, yeah, this is a good system, because we refuse to fund that either.
It should make sure that any of his children who he's passed that addiction on to are treated well too. Pro-life's not just in the womb, Kirsten, it's for the whole life.
All right, Governor, thank you. Candidates, thank you. We're going to take a final
I guess they finally picked up on that talking point.
break, and when we come back, we'll hear from all of you with your closing statements. This is the NBC News Republican
Okay, is this just
presidential
closing
debate. We'll be back
statements?
right
Is this going to be anything interesting?
The world stays number one.
We have to move forward, and we can do this.
Okay, sure. Yeah, let's just leave it at that. They talked about the abortion issue. We've said what we need to say. My parents did foster care, and the kids were always relieved to get them because there are some horror stories. Yeah, exactly. We don't make sure to keep track of these things. Lots of foster homes also don't report runaways, or they rehome, i.e. traffic kids that they just don't like often. They don't do enough adequate checks on these kids. Yeah, the system is strained. It's weird. There's like not enough supervision on some aspects where Child Protective Services gets involved, but there are other situations where there's like over-involvement for some families and under-involvement in a lot of other issues. My family's had experiences with CPS where it's like, I don't think that taking away the children was justified because, you know, it generally is considered the absolute last thing you should do. Like separating kids from their families, you usually want to rehome them with a family member or something along those lines. And though all of those protocols were not followed in this situation. So like, yeah, sometimes CPS is really overzealous and over polices certain families. And often those families are going to be like people of color, immigrants, you know, Native Americans, just those kind of folks who get more scrutiny. And whereas, yeah, they're like, once you get the kid in foster care, it's like, I don't give a shit about it. Like, we send them their $300 a month for each kid or whatever it is, and then let's like not check up on them at all. The American people are overwhelmingly saying we want to protect abortion rights. I don't know what Trump's position on it is. I don't know if it's going to matter, because who knows if he's going to get the nomination. But, you know, we have several GOP candidates, I guess, who are interested in maintaining the will of the people and are unwilling to even discuss imposing a federal ban, even if it's just partially because they understand they couldn't get away with doing a federal ban. Thank you so much to my patrons and potential future patrons. I especially want to shout out Tiago Nascimento, Mersh Rolvog, Michelle Frateroli, Amanda B., Wellington Marcus, Michelle Winter, Danielle McDonald, Suzanne Maynard, Spooky Heather Sylvia, Past Null Infinity, Jamie Jam, Nova, Elizabeth Bartell, Sojo, Sarah A., Kevin Young, Athiet, Desi Quiche, Liam Hodgson, and Mr. Atheist.